On our last episode of As the World Burns, the good people of Kenilworth needed to find a solution to their problem, where the underground fires had sprung a hole, and they decided the best solution was to assemble a task force to plug the hole for $1 million a month. $990,000 in administrative fees, and $10,000 to get a guy with a track hoe and a dozer to fill it with some dirt.
Started getting contracts in place to address it.
Getting workers up here to plug up the hole is costing the state a hefty price tag.
It is very expensive. This effort that we're doing just this month is, our contracts are written for $1 million.
But since...
and we don't know for sure if our actions will work to get the smoke to go away, but it's looking promising at this point.
But as fate would have it, there's 11 more holes that need to be plugged, a total of 12 underground coal fires burning simultaneously right now in Utah. But never fear, they've assembled a task force.
But listen up. I got a 3-point plan to fix everything.
Okay, all joking aside, we're about to watch an in-depth coverage of these underground coal fires, but this image you're looking at here, the red ones are mine fires. These are all Utah coal fires. The red ones are at a coal mine, and the yellow ones are not at coal mines. And you can see we have 3 yellow ones here and 1 up here, so 4 of those total. And of the red ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 red ones, 4 yellow ones, 12 total. And the ones that are coal fires that are not burning at a mine, they're just burning right through the ground in the coal seams. And so I thought their plan to plug the hole sounded like something straight from President Camacho's 3-point plan to fix everything.
Tonight we're taking a look at an abandoned mine fire here in Utah that recently put up plumes of hazardous, toxic smoke. A deep dive on this tonight. The Kenilworth mine fire has been burning for years. Here's where the mine is located. Let's take a look on a map. It's in Carbon County in the Book Cliffs, east of Helper, just outside of the small mining community of Kenilworth, a town that has rich mining history dating back to the early 1900s. The town of Kenilworth was recently inundated with smoke from the mine fire, which hasn't been in operation for quite some time. Time to go in depth now with Steve Fleury of Utah's Division of Oil, Gas and Mining.
We've had quite a few fires the past few years. We've had a lot of them have been associated with wildfires that have ignited coal refuse piles that are.
Okay, correlation does not equal causation. This will give me a chance to use some really big, smart-sounding words like correlational coefficiency. He just said that a lot of these underground coal fires are correlated to wildfires. Correlational coefficiency is always expressed as a fraction. It's a way of numerically measuring a correlation between 2 incidents and the degree to which they coincide. 0.5 over 1 means 50% of the time that one thing happens, the other thing also happens. 0.75 over 1 means 75% of the time that this happens, then that also happens. And even if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, correlation does not equal causation. Every time this moon goes down, the sun comes up. Therefore, the moon going down must cause the sun to come up, right? No, even though it's a 1-to-1 correlation, they are both the result of a third factor, the rotation of the Earth. Every time there's one of these underground coal fires, there's a wildfire on the surface. Ergo, the correlation is a 1-to-1, and the wildfire on the surface must be causing the underground coal fire, right? No. They are both the result of a third factor, ground current electricity that causes both the underground coal fire and the above ground wildfire.
On the landscape, some of them that we buried, but then the fire disrupted the land so much that it uncovered them and ignited them. And then we've even had coal seams that have caught fire from wildfires recently. And I think that uptick is from the increase in wildfires that we've seen due to climate change.
How difficult is it to put a fire out that's underground?
Well, they can be quite difficult underground. Really, the best way to put a fire out is to expose the actual burning coal and to dig it out and quench it right in front of you. That's the only way to be certain. Otherwise, you have to use other techniques like injecting grout or fire retardant foams, cutting off fire blocks, and just trying to either eliminate the oxygen supply or the heat or whatever it takes to disrupt the fire. But it can be a very challenging thing to do for an underground coal mine fire.
Kenilworth, what's the history with this area, and how long has this been a target for you, I guess, in terms of how long this fire maybe has even been burning?
Well, we don't really know the history of this fire. We weren't aware of it until 2021. It was reported to us, and but it didn't have much surface expression at that time. It was just a little bit of smoke coming from what looked like some old breakout portals, but there's no road or anything leading to it. And we were setting up a monitoring program for it. When this happened in August, it appears a subsidence hole opened up and it started smoking quite a bit. So it was changed drastically overnight. And then even a month later, then it really started smoking quite a bit more. And but we treated it as an emergency right away when we saw that subsidence open up, because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't want it to ignite any vegetation around it and start a wildfire. So with the cooperation with the Division of Forestry Fires and State Lands, got a helicopter and some of their staff to go up and kind of grub out the area, reduce the vegetation. But there wasn't a lot in that area, but we wanted to make sure. And then that was our first chance to really monitor the fire. It's hard to get to the location. It's quite the hike up to it. There's cliff bands above and below it. You can access it on foot, but it's a difficult thing to do.
When do you think was the last time that site was even active with actual work? Have you been able to pinpoint that?
I don't know offhand. I think it was the mine closed down in the 70s. It's pre-law, so it was prior to any permitting and regulations on the mining, and that's what makes it eligible for us to work on. There has to be no responsible party for it. So that mine was active from the early 1900s, and there were reports that there was a fire in that portion of the mine back then, and there are also reports that miners, while advancing drill borings ahead of their work, they encountered areas that had been previously burned out naturally from where the coal had caught fire, and also areas that seemed to be burning. So they recognized this part of the mine, there was a fire over there, and I think they sealed it off and just proceeded forward. It's possible that this mine may be 100 years old. I mean, this fire may be 100 years old and has just now reached the surface. We just don't know enough yet. Right now, we're proceeding with an emergency action to try to reduce the smoke because it's inundating the town of Kenilworth below. And so we want to make sure we can address that, but there'll be a long-term kind of action to do an investigation, characterize the fire, try to delineate it, and see, the extent of the fire, and come up with some options that there may be to address it long-term.
You mentioned that we've seen more of these fires as of late, and a lot of them have been a result of wildfire that have gotten into some of these mines. How many are active right now? How many coal fires do you actually, or other related mines, do you have that you believe are still burning in the state of Utah?
We're aware of 7, including this Kenilworth fire. One or two of them are we're not really sure if they're still active, but there are a couple too that are pretty active. Most of them are in remote areas. This one's probably the closest to a town, the Kenilworth fire. even though it's up on the side of the mountain above the town and difficult to access. It's relatively close.
Can you describe some of the things that people were doing in order to try to, I guess, eliminate the smoke impacts? It seems like that's the big one, right?
Sure, yeah. Well, as soon as we, sat down to try to figure out how to approach this fire, um, we recognized that the first thing we really needed to do was to shut off any oxygen supply. And we obtained all the old, or a lot of old mine maps to determine where the adits, portals, breakouts, things like that for the mine workings were in the area. So the mine workings cover an extent of 7 square miles around the mine. So they go back quite a far away. We located an adit that had been closed, but still had some, it wasn't sealed up entirely, and it was drawing in quite a bit of air. It was 2.5 miles away that was drawing in that air into the mine workings. So we've identified 4 or 5 old portals and subsidence features associated with old portals that were drawing air, it seemed, and we've been plugging them up with a fire retardant foam to seal them off and to block the intake of air into the mine workings. And it seems we saw a pretty quick effect. The air, the amount of smoke that's coming out of the main vent has dropped significantly. It's still smoking, but it has dropped, and that was the intent. We wanted to drop have the smoke reduced before we got workers up on the bench where the main vent hole is. So we wanted to be able to reduce the danger to the workers of if the wind were to shift and blow the smoke toward where the workers are. They'll have and be prepared with equipment to be able to escape in case something like that happens. But if we were to reduce the smoke, that was our first goal, to be able to get into the site. Then we'll be plugging up near the vent hole subsidence features that are intaking air that are right there near the hole, and then eventually go to the hole itself. The hazards are just that they are releasing a lot of gases that are toxic. You can have vents on the surface that are really hot, and animals or people could fall into them if they aren't aware of them. So we want people to be aware of the hazards around these fires. So it's the smoke and the actual vent holes and subsidence features that are associated with them. So this one at Kenilworth seems to be smoking quite a bit more than any coal seam fire that I've seen. So it is unusual in that respect. We have several that are smoking, but we don't see even a fraction of the amount of smoke that this one seems to be.
So this is very different. This one is very unique.
Yes, and the amount of smoke that it's putting out, it's quite alarming. The smoke is toxic. It has only a couple % oxygen in it. It's mostly carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. It has even hydrogen sulfide, which is a deadly gas. So really, people need to stay away from the area, and hopefully we can reduce the smoke quite a bit.
You can read more about the Kenilworth mine fire right now, KUTV.com. I just wrote up this article for you. There's a map in there. You'll see it a little further down. It's actually got the active coal fires burning in Utah right now for those interested. It's beyond what's happening here in Kenilworth.
Now I want you to listen closely to what he says right here, and he's very skittish and sheepish about what he's saying and how he's saying it, because he doesn't want to let the cat out of the bag. But he talks about how this mine started up in the early 1900s, like 1906, and that they did have a fire back then in that mine, and there were reports that as they were drilling, bore drilling ahead of them, they found places where the coal had burned naturally from, and he doesn't finish his sentence. What did they burn naturally from? Because no one was mining there before them, so it wasn't the previous miners that made that underground coal burn. If it burned naturally, it was from And he doesn't finish his sentence. It's from the cataclysm cycles.
From the early 1900s. And there were reports that there was a fire in that portion of the mine back then. And there are also reports that miners, while advancing drill borings ahead of their work, they encountered areas that had been previously burned out naturally from where the coal had caught fire, and also areas that seemed to be burning. So they reckoned out the early 1900s. And there were reports that there was a fire in that portion of the mine back then. And there are also reports that miners, while advancing drill borings ahead of their work, they encountered areas that had been previously burned out naturally from where the coal had caught fire, and also areas that seemed to be burning. So you recognize.
So it sounds like he's trying to normalize it and minimize it throughout the whole thing. When he says, we're aware of 7, I pull up the map that he shows and there's 8 mine fires and 4 that are non-mine coal fires. And they try to minimize it by saying, well, yeah, it's been going for a long time. This is totally normal. Yeah. He's dancing around what he knows to be the topic that he's discussing here. When there's 12 underground coal fires going in just Utah, all right now simultaneously, that's a pretty good indicator of what time it is. And I see fire inside of mountains, and I see fire burning the trees, and I see fire hollowing souls. I see fire, blood in the breeze, and I hope that you remember me. And if we should die tonight, then we should all die together. Raise a glass of wine for the last time, calling out, Father, oh, prepare and we will watch the flames burn Auburn on the mountainside. Desolation comes upon the sky, and I see fire. Those coal miners that came upon underground coal that had previously been burnt naturally from, and he didn't finish the sentence, it's from the previous cataclysm cycle, from geomagnetic induction, from ground current. It's not from lightning, it's not from wildfires on the surface that reach down into the ground and light the coal on fire. So don't delay, act now, supplies are running out. Allow if you're still alive, 6 to 8 years to arrive. And if you follow, there may be a tomorrow. But if the offer's shunned, you might as well be walking on the sun. Dun, dun, dun. Might as well be walking on the sun. Dun, dun, dun. Might as well be walking on the sun. And you can clearly see that that Muse message, Walking on the Sun, is blatant and direct. It's not metaphors and analogies that can be interpreted in a million different ways, but within the proper context of the understanding of plasma fire, that song makes perfect sense and is a very direct message. So I got some new Muse messages for a soothing, sultry soundtrack to your apocalypse as it's happening, all by Fleury. In this order, I would suggest listening to them. Sirens by Fleury, Love and War by Fleury, Breathe by Fleury, Hurricane by Fleury, and last but not least, well, kind of least, Carry You, and it's between a combination of Fleury and Ruelle. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. But the first 4, she's definitely singing about the apocalypse, the cataclysm, the harvest, the beings that are on the other side of the veil that we're going to be introduced to very soon. I'll leave it up to you to interpret the lyrics. So the first 4 I've been listening to pretty much every day for the last month since I found them. Actually, one of them was shown to me and then I found the others. So I'll list them in the order that I would suggest listening them to, starting with Sirens and then Breathe. and then Love and War, and then Hurricane, and this collaboration she does with Ruelle is amplifying the idea of Muse messages. The lyrics say, "You're not alone, I've been here the whole time singing you a song, and that I will carry you." In the music video Breathe, breathe can be an analogy, a metaphor for the cycles that the earth goes through. Inhale and exhale, just like the song by awolnation called Wake Up. Let's take some time to breathe out. It's only gonna take a little time before we start to lose our minds. I know you think I may be out of line, and we're leaving all the haters behind, but it uses the word breathe. Let's take some time to breathe. Let's take some time to breathe out. Like the decompression that Jay Dreamer speaks of. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to leave the links in the description to the Fleury Muse messages, and I think you'll find them very moving. And this is actually a video that I uploaded on December 9th, just haven't made it public yet, and probably I may or may not. But it's got a couple others linked in the description. One's called Breathe by Telepop Music, and Wake Up by awolnation, the one that I was just grabbing lyrics from.